U.S. stocks fell for a fourth straight session on Monday as investors' worries persisted over the Federal Reserve's fight against inflation, potentially pushing the economy into a recession. The Dow fell 0.5%, the S&P 500 fell 0.9%, while the Nasdaq lost 1.5%. The three major indexes this year are on track for their biggest annual decline since the 2008 financial crisis, and Monday's continued losses signaled to Sam Stovall, chief investment strategist at CFRA Research, that investors saw an ugly year ahead, too.
I think it's a combination of investors continuing to harvest tax losses that they've experienced so far this year, continued concern about how aggressive the Fed is likely to be. Expectations for this coming week are that we're going to continue to get declines in new home sales, existing home sales. Durable orders are expected to go down. Consumer confidence likely to be lower. So I think investors really are preparing for a recession in 2023. And what they don't know is how deep it's going to be.
Market heavyweights such as Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon were some of the biggest drags on the stock market on Monday. Trading in Tesla saw wild swings during the session but finished only slightly lower after a Twitter poll showed a majority of respondents want Elon Musk to step down as CEO of the social media platform. Meta Platform shares fell after the European Commission said it could impose a fine of up to 10% of the company's annual global turnover if evidence showed an infringement on the EU's antitrust laws. And shares of casino operators fell after Macau said on Friday that 6 casino firms will invest around $15 billion as part of new 10-year contracts they signed to operate in the world's biggest gambling hub.
6 people are dead, including a 73-year-old suspect after a mass shooting at a condominium building in the Canadian city of Vaughan on Sunday. The shooting left one other person wounded. Vaughan Police Chief Jim McSween said at a news conference on Monday that the shooter has been identified as Francesco Villi, a resident of the building.
We can say all victims reside in the condo building. 3 victims were members of the condominium board, but the motive for the shooting remains part of this very complicated and very fluid investigation, which is still ongoing at this time.
Police say they responded to a call about an active male shooter who had shot several victims at the condominium at about 7:20 p.m. Police found and fired at the suspect in a hallway, and he was pronounced dead about 40 minutes later, according to Special Investigations Unit spokesperson Christy Dennett.
I don't believe there was an exchange of gunfire. I believe there was a number of shots from one officer, and those a number of those shots would have struck the man, and then he was pronounced deceased at the scene.
Authorities recovered dead bodies from several floors, along with a semi-automatic handgun that is suspected of having been used in the shooting, Dennett said. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeted on Monday, "To the families and friends of the victims of yesterday's shooting in Vaughan, I'm keeping you in my thoughts." Canada's gun homicide rate is a fraction of what is seen in the United States, according to 2020 data, but it is still higher than other wealthy countries and has been rising between 2009 and 2020. Vaughan is about 15 miles north of Toronto in the province of Ontario.
Bad news for migrants hoping to soon seek asylum in the United States after the Supreme Court ordered Title 42, the COVID-era restriction preventing their entry, to stay in place at least for now. These migrants have been waiting in Chihuahua, Mexico, expecting Title 42 to expire on Wednesday after a federal judge last month ruled it unlawful.
Please soften the hearts of President Joe Biden. Let us cross into the United States. We've suffered a lot. We've suffered a lot since we left Venezuela. We went through the jungle. All those countries we've been through.
But a group of 19 states with Republican attorneys general took the case to the conservative-leaning Supreme Court on Monday, citing concerns that lifting the measure would saddle them with extra costs as more migrants entered. Chief Justice John Roberts has now given until Tuesday afternoon for the parties involved to respond and press pause on any Title 42 decision. Title 42 was imposed under former President Donald Trump in March 2020 as a means to stop the spread of COVID-19. It allowed border officials to swiftly expel migrants to Mexico without a chance to seek asylum. After the federal judge's ruling against it and the CDC saying earlier this year it was no longer needed on grounds of public health, the Biden White House had been preparing for Title 42 to end on Wednesday. The administration had been aiming to ask Congress for some $3 billion to pay for extra staffing, technology, migrant holding facilities, and transportation at the U.S. Mexico border. Authorities were expecting up to 14,000 people to try to cross into the U.S. every day after the restrictions expired, double the current rate. Biden's administration has also been weighing new rules following the end of Title 42. Sources earlier told Reuters that officials privately discussed several Trump-style plans to deter people from Latin America from entering the U.S. That includes barring single adults seeking asylum at the U.S. Mexico border.
The fight for FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried to resist extradition to the U.S. has reportedly come to an end. He was seen escorted under heavy security to a courthouse in the Bahamas on Monday, where a source close to the proceedings says Bankman-Fried agreed to be sent to the United States. There he faces fraud charges related to the collapse of FTX, his cryptocurrency exchange. Bankman-Fried has been accused of orchestrating one of the biggest financial frauds in U.S. history, as U.S. prosecutors describe it. They say he embezzled billions from his customers to invest in his hedge fund Alameda Research. At Monday's hearing, Bankman-Fried's local attorney told the magistrate he didn't know why his client was brought to court and was not ready to consent to the extradition process. However, Bankman-Fried then requested to see the indictment filed against him in federal court in New York last week before consenting to extradition. He was then allowed to speak to his U.S. counsel over the phone before being taken back to a prison. Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, was once one of the biggest names in crypto and was at one point worth $26 billion. He also became a substantial donor in politics, media, and other causes. But after reports Bankman-Fried secretly moved $10 billion of customer funds to prop up his own investments, traders rushed to withdraw funds from FTX last month. In interviews since, Bankman-Fried acknowledged there were oversight failings at FTX, but did not personally think that he has any criminal liability. His decision to consent to extradition following his arrest in the Bahamas last week would pave the way for him to appear in U.S. court to face wire fraud, money laundering, and campaign finance charges.
Amber Heard posted on Instagram on Monday that she would settle the defamation claims brought against her by Johnny Depp, writing the decision came after a great deal of deliberation, and it, quote, is not an act of concession. Depp won more than $10 million in damages in June after a 6-week trial featuring graphic testimony about the movie star's soured relationship. At the center of that trial was a December 2018 op-ed Heard wrote about domestic abuse in the Washington Post, in which Depp claimed he was defamed. A 7-person jury awarded Depp $10.35 million in damages. The jury determined that Heard was defamed too, awarding her $2 million. At the time, Depp depicted the trial result as a vindication, while Heard said it was a disappointment. Depp faced a different outcome in Britain a few years ago when he sued the Sun tabloid for calling him a wife-beater. A London High Court judge ruled that he had repeatedly assaulted Heard. Depp and Heard met in 2011 while filming The Rum Diary and were married in February 2015. Their divorce was finalized about 2 years later.